Okay. Hi, guys. Our final class on mental health and illness. So today we're going to and alternative approaches. Now, not just in Africa, but across the world, culture is very rich. And you remember the statement, culture strategy for breakfast. So the power of culture, we can say, is deep, okay, deeply ingrained in people in different societies that usually takes a lot of effort, okay, generational effort. So, what we are recognizing in this particular content for this week is that which is deeply ingrained in the generational imprint of our clients. We try or we work together with culture to be able to assist mentally ill and okay, considering the reality of the situation on the ground. We particularly refer to the African context because for us, we are in the African context, and the examples are very rich, not just in the African context, but also in other parts of the world. Sometimes even enforced or having been practiced for a much longer period as compared to our context. So, having said that, we are appreciating contemporary medicine, and in this course, we have been emphasizing on the biopsychosocial model. And in that model, the biological aspect would look at the, you know, the biological aspect of contemporary medicine. Okay, we are talking about mainstream psychiatry. Okay, and in terms of the psychosocial aspect, the psychological we'll be looking at we have been looking at the main psychology, and we have looked at various proponents in psychology and their input to mental health and mental illness, okay? Their understanding of the causes of mental illness. And these have been borrowed from Western frameworks, okay? And so that's why when we talk about the various cultures, we look at cultures like India, where there's such a wealth of an array of cultures, such that in, let's say, in the Western setup or in the Christian setup, or even in the Muslim setup, if we were referred to God, that in the Indian setup, they would say, which God? Because they have so many. Okay. But in the Christian or Islamic setup, we'll be referring to one God. And similar to the traditional African, whereby there's the belief in ancestral spirits, and these ancestral spirits are okay. And if we come back to medicine in the African setup, we want to recognize that we relied a lot in the previous generations on indigenous knowledge systems. One thing I would like to emphasize on that in the African setup, evidence shows that some of the contemporary practices of medicine actually existed in the African setup and were borrowed or taken away from the African setup. And because in the African setup, recording was done verbally and not in writing, so information would be passed from one generation to another through stories. It was easy for other systems to take away this knowledge and then in the African setup have no records of them. So one particular example we have that originated from the African setup in terms of contemporary medicine, delivering babies through cesarean is was originally done in Africa, okay, but whose knowledge, because of the taking away, let's use taking away of that knowledge, and of the verbal movement of the knowledge. That is what traditionally was used to pass on knowledge, with those of the other systems coming in and forcing their knowledge and refusing the practice of traditional knowledge. So, connecting to the depth and the wealth knowledge when it comes to treatment and medicine in our African cultures. So, within the traditional systems, there's also dependence or reference to, and there's an array of alternatives within these traditional knowledge of medicine. And in particular to address mental health challenges, there is so much, there's such a wealth of medication that is administered for these particular purposes as regards to knowledge. But we will not wealth of knowledge because we don't distract ourselves from the focus social model, but we want to look at this angle in order to appreciate it and see how to work with our clients who deeply believe in this knowledge. So we must understand the approaches that are used in the African society, cultural, responsive, and respectful care. Okay, because these methods have worked over time, and we will not just look at traditional African response to mental illness or treatment for mental illness. We'll also look at other alternative approaches to healing outside contemporary medicine or Western frameworks. So, having said that, let's understand the indigenous mental health approaches. Okay. Mental health approaches are grounded in holistic worldviews, therefore integrating understanding of the and the community. So diagnosis is done not just on the mind, that is if we're talking about the psyche, it is done on body, for example, symptoms that present themselves despite imbalance, the spirit. Now, in the African setup or in the indigenous setup, there's strong in the spirit that it is the body that hosts the spirit, and it is this that spirit is lifelong. It experience death. It just transforms from being in the body, a form which is unseen by the physical eye. So it is also targeted, and spirits are also targeted in the treatment of mental health. For example, if it is felt that one has, you know, had a negative relationship with ancestors, okay, those are the spirits, okay, they're no longer in body form. And the community in which the person lives may lead to, we must consider that there may be imbalance in the relationship that one has with their community. Person in terms of their, and then these approaches are grounded in relational well-being. Mental health at as interconnected with social harmony and environment, how we relate or how our clients relate with the environment, looking after the environment, how they treat wildlife, treat the land, how they treat water bodies. And so the relationship between the human being and the environment has to be one of respect, or else the environment may attack back through mental illness. Again, in terms of indigenous mental health approaches, these approaches are also grounded in cultural beliefs and spirituality, the traditions. And so illnesses may be linked to ancestral spirits, to curses, or spiritual imbalance. Okay, so going against cultural, the traditions would expose one to mental illness, or mental illness could be explained by one going against the cultural beliefs or the spiritual beliefs, particular African setup. Okay, now let's look at the types of mental health in our system. So we're not talking just about the African beliefs, but we're also talking about the alternative mental health outside contemporary medicine. First, we have traditional healers. So in this case, we are talking about traditional healers to addressing issues of mental health. So these include herbalists. They would use different herbs to treat the person who is mentally ill. Diviners, they would look into the spiritual realm to diagnose the cause of mental illness. Spiritualists would do the same, who had a lot of knowledge on the same. Through rituals, okay, various practices expose the cause of mental illness or the treatment for the same. For example, the throwing of bones, as you often see in movies, dreams. They would start with the client's dreams, with dreams of family members and their own dreams, trances. So the use of incense and other herbs to reach a transial state, to enable them to connect with the superconscious, we could say, to be able to draw information about the cause of illness or the treatment of the same, and ancestral guidance, linking with ancestors to understand or to diagnose mental illness. They would use herbal remedies, they would use prayers, they would carry out animal sacrifices, and cleansing ceremonies for the community. Perhaps if something had happened that would lead to mental illness in the community, to carry out cleansing ceremonies within the community to chase away evil or mental illness from the community. So, for example, in the Luya community, mental illness may be interpreted as a sign of ancestral displeasure or witchcraft, and traditional healers conduct cleansing rituals and reconciliation with ancestors, often to be able to keep the community mentally healthy. Is happening in current, and so one the occurrence of mental illness in the past, when these ceremonies were conducted, of course, with control systems for research, and those practices are not done as. Then we have faith-based healing, also as alternative. Now, this is more common society with the African society, more, okay, much of the population having moved away from traditional healing to Christianity, Islam, or to any other religion, due to the influence of the missionaries or the Islam. So in embracing of, you will have healing through prayer. So we have seen in various fora or with the social media, healing that occurs through prayer, very evident, healing through fasting, and deliverance in churches or in mosques through prayer, through fasting, through tithing, okay, through certain sacrifices that are spiritual, okay, with the Christian setup, and also in mosques. So in this case, there's usually emphasis on spirit of mental illness, for example, or involvement in sin, who was or their ancestors, as in group settings, for example, in Christian revivals and in crusades. So, for example, we have the Legio Maria Church and other Pentecostal groups in Kenya who run prayer camps where people with symptoms of mental illness seek healing and experience healing. Another alternative we have are the community and clan-based systems. In this regard, disputes in the community, loss in the community can be addressed communally. Elders may intervene to restore social harmony. And healing includes social reintegration and rituals to restore balance. For example, in one of the cultures we have in Kenya, somebody who has committed murder within the community, usually their house is set on fire, and sometimes all the houses within that homestead are set on fire for various reasons, among them a bid to control mental illness affecting members of the community. In that case, the community and the clan-based systems would address that issue. Then we have complementary therapies that are contemporary, that we can also use biopsychosocial model in our clients. For example, meditation used by a client going through biological treatment. Okay, meditation. They say, and somebody who's suffering from anxiety, meditation to calm them down. So these are therapies that we can also use alongside. So the previous ones were recognizing the alternatives that are there that we don't practice, but that we appreciate because our clients or people really believe in them. Okay, and when they believe in them, they help them to also heal because of their faith in them. Okay, and because they're culturally connected from to them, moving them away from those beliefs is can be quite challenging. Okay, so instead of working with a system which is in conflict, we cooperate with them. But now here we are or therapies that work at the biological medicine, psychological treatments, and social treatment. Okay, so meditation being one of them that our clients can use, temporary medication, mindful or aware of the environment. They're usually useful for treatment of anxiety, treatment of depression, and trauma. We also have art and music therapy. Art therapy is used quite extensively by social workers, particularly when working with children, adolescents, so in painting and different forms of art. Music therapy, very helpful when working with the elderly. So these are usually culturally embedded based trauma healing. So we can use this alongside contemporary medicine. We have yoga, we have massage, we have acupuncture. Massage, particularly, is commonly used in refugee camps. For example, a lot of NGOs massage as an alternative, a complementary therapy for refugees who have gone through trauma. It is not rampant in our society in terms of treatment, but particularly in Kakuma camp, it is highly used, gaining track in the rest of society, particularly urban wellness centers. Then we have herbal medicine. This is widely used within society to complement contemporary medicine. We have plants like the neem, in Swahili referred to as marubaini, which are used for the treatment of flus and for cleansing, for detoxing. We have garlic, ginger treatments, particularly during COVID-19. A lot of traditional treatments were used because of lack of access to contemporary medicine to be able to suppress the symptoms of COVID, and they were very successful. So, those are also usually incorporated in healing, including in mental health healing or mental ill health healing. Strengths of indigenous and alternative approaches include them being accessible and trusted by the community. And so the client will usually believe in them more, establish that first before incorporating. So when you find out that your client is deeply embedded in the belief of such is when we see how to incorporate them. Um, they're embedded in local language and belief systems, so it is easy to the client. They promote collective cohesion. They're usually done communally, and so they bring the community together, which is part of which leads to success in healing. Remember in a previous class the importance of the family in healing and the community in healing, importance of social fibers, okay, in healing. And so the fact that these are done collectively within society, emphasizes or promotes or accelerates their effect. Again, they are often less stigmatizing than hospital-based treatment, accepted across the generations, and they also recognize spiritual and cultural dimensions of suffering. So they are broad-based. They present a worldview. They don't just look at one angle. The limitations and concerns about these indigenous and alternative approaches include misdiagnosis of serious psychiatric disorders, and so there may be delay in treatment, delay in accessing evidence based treatment. Again, practices may violate human rights, for example, isolation. There's lack of regulation and standardization in some countries. In some countries, like in South Sudan, sangomas and can practice free. Again, there's potential for exploitation if there's lack of regulation. For example, in 2016, a human rights report documented the chaining of mentally ill persons in some prayer camps and raised concerns about abuse and dignity violations. Let's look at how we can bridge indigenous and formal mental health systems. So the models of collaboration that we can use, we have referral pathways between traditional healers and hospitals. Like for example, where there's regulation in Africa, that referral pathway is very clean. And so a client may be referred from either the institutions. Again, South Africa is a good example where such that are collaborative have occurred, dialogue forums for mutual respect and knowledge exchange. So it will be important for dialogue forums as we proceed on. In Uganda, the traditional and modern health practitioners together against aid, TITA program, build trust and referral systems between traditional healers and health workers. And so, in all this, what is our role as social workers? First is that we need to carry out competent assessments and referrals. Okay, understand and appreciate culture and use this to carry out assessment and referrals. Another role in this regard is building partnerships with healers in the community. We may find a situation whereby contemporary medicine may not even cater fully for the population at hand because of the costs. But the traditional and faith healers on the ground, and that can be an alternative for treatment. Okay. Another role we have is to advocate for rights in traditional, where the rights of our clients are put, like children who are mentally ill, those who are mentally ill considering their rights. We give the example of chaining, for example. So creating awareness also among traditional healers against uh, um, abusing the rights of the mentally ill. Another role that we play is education and community dialogue to reduce harmful practices. So creating awareness among community members, okay, and all community members. We also have to uphold our ethics, okay. So let's look at some of the ethical considerations in practice, alternative and traditional healing. Consent and confidentiality in culturally diverse contexts needs to be looked at, and these will come through engagement with traditional and alternative healers, respecting, like for example, said people's issues can publicly, okay. So in that case, you're talking about issues of confidentiality. Of course, you may find that prior to that, members within that setup gave their consent. Okay, so just to work together to be able to see how to address some of these or ethics. Another ethical consideration is respecting beliefs without compromising safety or ethics. So, for example, when there's need for mandatory reporting, we have to ethically observe such. Challenging harmful practices while preserving dignity and culture. So, while working against harmful practices, we have to do it in consideration of the client's dignity, sorry, and the culture of that particular society. Sorry. So I just want to go back and make a comment. Confidentiality, let's say, when matters of ill health are being presented, community set up. Another angle that we can present about it is that when people have suffered for so long and have suffered so much, sometimes confidentiality is not much of an issue, because if they're in a setup whereby they that would say they have suffered with that mental illness for 20, 30 years, as compared to the of sharing that information one on one. So we have to look a holistic. Again, ethically, we need to look at how we can be getting spiritual explanations with professional objectivity. That sometimes conflict, but it is how to respectfully be able to address the issues that come up. Okay, so let's look at the competency-based activities that you will begin to do before we meet and go through them. First, we have a so you'll do this in your groups. We have a client who prefers to see a traditional healer for schizophrenia. As a social worker, how do you balance respect, safety, and evidence-based care? Okay, then we have another group discussion. Should social workers refer clients to faith or traditional healers? Under what conditions? So in summary, we can say that Indigenous and alternative approaches remain central to how many Kenyans experience and address mental distress. Social workers must be culturally competent and ethically aware when navigating diverse healing systems. And integration and dialogue between systems can promote respectful, holistic care. I have which you can access physically in the library or online through the portal from the librarian or just online. I think you can then see that the final content of this, which is the week 14, I had put the cards, and you can use these for your revision as we now go towards the examination period. All right. So I think that is it. Me through the class rep or directly with any concerns or any issues. There are some matters that we've talked about with the class rep, some details, and I will get back to you through the class rep on that. Guys, thank you so much for attending the class, and God bless you. Bye.